So without further ado, I'll introduce Simon Collier and Melanie Hughes from the Digital Technologies in Focus project at ACARA. And we're delighted to also hear from Linda and Rosetta, two teachers at Victorian schools that have been participating in that project. And Simon will introduce them later in the session. But I know it's a great thing for teachers all around Australia to know about this project and the kind of work being done. So thank you. Take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, Nathan. I'll just pass over to Melanie to do the acknowledgement of country.
Thanks to everyone for coming along today. Before we commence, we wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which each of us meet today and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We'd like to acknowledge that they are the foundation of our culture and a source of pride for our nation. Through their rich and ancient continuous cultures, they have developed knowledges that enrich us all.
Excellent. Thanks, Mel. And it's great to see so many people online, and really looking forward to sharing some of the work that's been done across Victoria, but also across the country with the Digital Technologies in Focus project. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through what the project is. Some of you may have never heard of the Digital Technologies in Focus project. We're going to share some of the resources that have been developed that you can use and you can explore. And then we're going to hear from some teachers around how they've gone about implementing digital technologies across their schools. And there'll also be some time for some questions. But as Nathan said, if you've got questions along the way, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll try and get to those as we go through. So my name's Simon Collier, and I'm a teacher that has worked across Victoria, both in primary school and secondary schools, mostly in the Geelong area, and also currently working for ACARA in the Digital Technologies project. So the project itself is all about supporting schools implement the digital technologies curriculum. So this, as I mentioned, it's not just based in Victoria, although we're going to hear from some Victorian teachers today. But across the country, we have 160 schools that are part of the project, and we're in our 4th year of the project. There are 8 curriculum officers, so each of those curriculum officers that are across the country work really closely with 20 schools for 4 years. And the idea is around ensuring it's a sustainable implementation. So it's not reliant on a curriculum officer or one person kind of leading the support. The idea is around building an ecosystem for the school, so that when, for example, my role finishes with the schools that I'm going to share today, they'll continue the great work that they're doing. As I mentioned, the whole focus of the project is around supporting digital technologies. So I'm going to share a little bit about the project, what kinds of work we do, and then we're going to share some of the resources that you can explore and use. So as I mentioned, the objective is around supporting implementation. So how we go about that is supporting school leaders, facilitating professional learning, whether that be face-to-face in the school, working with leaders of the school, or doing demo classes. Some of it, obviously at the moment, a lot of it's been online, and it's been amazing to see what teachers are able to do in this short amount of time that we've kind of shifted over to remote learning and the learning curve. And I think we'll hear a little bit about that today from the schools. And the last one there is around publishing resources for schools to use across the country. So what support schools get for that 4-year project? Well, they get a curriculum officer. They also get lots of professional learning beyond just the curriculum officer. We have a huge network that we provide support for. They also get some grants, of small grant money that's received at each step of the project. And the idea around a professional learning ecosystem for the school is about building the networks and building the support that the schools can offer. So seeing what other useful resources that they can adhere to and get kind of expertise from. So I'm just going to quickly show some examples of what it looks like for the project and within the schools. So you can see here some staff that are working closely around curriculum planning, looking at the current school curriculum. What does the digital technologies curriculum look like? Where does it fit? So obviously there's quite a bit of professional learning and support around that. This picture here is actually of a number of schools getting together and actually collaborating and working on their digital technologies programs. So trying to build those networks is really important. And this one here is a picture of a class demonstration. So working with the students to build their capacity and understanding of what digital technologies is and what it might look like in the classroom. But also doing that as a team teacher kind of approach and train the trainer, so that the teachers in the school are getting the learning as well, and they're really building and understanding their capacity. This one I just threw in, which is a picture from this morning, actually. As you can see, I've got the same outfit on. But due to current remote learning restrictions in Melbourne, one of our schools, St. Stephen's and Rosette, will speak a little bit later, but this is an example of the support that we can still provide that in this current circumstance. So the students jumped on this morning. We spent 2 hours online, and the students went into little breakout rooms, and the idea was I was just there as a support for their app development that we started last term, but to kind of come back, the plan was to come back into the classroom, and obviously that's not possible at the moment. So you can see here, it was just amazing to see how much, how able the students are to be able to jump onto these online environments, share their screen, problem solve things, jump off, jump back on. It was great to see, and I think credit to the amount of work that teachers are doing across the country in these circumstances. So I've mentioned a couple of times around the ecosystem and what that means for the school, and you can see here the school in the middle, and we've used a similar structure here to the Australian Curriculum Technologies Circle, but the idea is that the school is in the centre. Just going to switch over to have a closer look here. And within that school, they have an option to be involved in geographic clusters. So we try and promote the schools getting together that are in a geographic cluster or close by, but also project-focused clusters, which actually means that schools that have decided to focus, say, on STEM across the country have the opportunity to come together and see what other schools are doing, or they have the opportunity to come together if their focus might be that they're a really small multi-age classroom school. So there's a whole range of different project focus clusters. And then obviously you can see the next kind of level of that ecosystem. And the idea is that through the project, this gets developed, and that's the sustainable approach of the project, that they have all of these connections and supports beyond the project or the 4-year cycle. And just to highlight, as I mentioned, St. Stephen's Primary School is online, and they've got a STEM illustration of practice that highlights these connections that they've made on the Australian Curriculum website. And there's a little video there, which Melanie will kind of show you some of the resources that are available for you. And then down there in the middle, you can see the Wodonga South Primary School, which Linda will share some of their experiences and challenges and learnings, and they've got some videos in there about how they've gone about implementing digital technologies. So I guess before we kind of start looking at some of those resources and hearing from the schools, I thought I'd just quickly, just to give context. So as you can see, we are from ACARA and the Australian Curriculum. The digital technologies is represented as part of a technologies subject, as you can see there. And I just wanted to highlight that obviously in Victoria, the curriculum is very similar. It's just the structure that it's shown. So obviously in Victoria, we have 3 strands: the digital systems, data and information, and creating digital solutions. But again, there's that focus around what are those ways of thinking and really developing those in students, that design thinking, computational thinking, and systems thinking. So before I introduce the staff from the schools and the teachers to share some of their experiences in the project, I'm just going to pass over to Melanie to share some of the resources that have been produced in this project that you have access to.
Thanks, Simon. I've got a couple of still images on the slides just to give you an in a nutshell idea of the sorts of things that you can find on the Digital Technologies in Focus project page. As Simon mentioned, part of the idea of the project is not only to support those 160 schools that are part of the project, but also going forward to support all schools nationally. So all of the resources we're currently making are up and free and public for everyone to use. And they include things like the video tutorials, school story videos, which are the sort that Simon emphasised that Rosetta has been part of in the school story section there. And I've just popped the link to the Digital Technologies in Focus page in the chat, but it's also on these slides, which Nathan is recording and will provide to you all after the presentation. But the easiest way to find the Digital Technologies in Focus page, where you have all these printable resources, classroom ideas, tutorials, explanations of the 3 types of thinking, the systems thinking, computational thinking, design thinking, and the key concepts that make up the Digital Technologies curriculum. You'll find lots and lots of material there to support you. A lot of it is looking at ways of using devices, and about half of it is also looking at unplugged ways that you can do that, because we realize that schools are doing all kinds of things, so we're trying to provide material to help you along the way. So I'm just going to do a very quick demonstration of where you can find some of these materials. So we currently have on the Australian Curriculum website, on the front page, there's the F to 10 curriculum, and you can find technologies there where you can find the curriculum content for digital technologies and also design and technologies, which sit under the technologies learning area. Today, we're going to roll across to the resources section in that top menu bar, and about halfway down, you'll see the Digital Technologies in Focus section there. And that's where you can find all of the materials that we're developing as part of this project. At the bottom of the page, there are a couple of large icons that you can click on. The school stories, which are the background videos and reflections about how the different schools that are in the project have gone, you can find under that school stories icon. And under the resources one, we have a range of materials there to help you, including tutorials on Scratch, Python, lots of other things that are there. There's a new set that have been published today that look at ways of using data sets online, and includes a little bit of a tutorial on how to do that with Excel. Under the teaching section, we have all kinds of resources, including ways of working with the vocabulary of the Digital Technologies curriculum, classroom ideas and tutorials. The classroom ideas are not lesson plans per se, but ways to help you think about how you might teach various parts of the curriculum. And they are designed for every state and territory, so you'll find things there that will help you with all kinds of things. There's material there to help with the idea of project management, especially in the context of teaching a digital technologies project, or a project that has those elements in it. Under digital systems, we have some ideas to help you think about ways you could teach what a digital system is and who uses it for F to 2. And there are printable cards to help you teach various concepts, and some ideas there to help you with that. Underneath the planning tab, we have links to the sequence of content. This resource is a new one that went up only a little while ago that talks about all the various things that you can use to teach digital technologies, which include data sets, emulator websites, all kinds of different unplugged resources and printable resources that we have produced ourselves or that link back to other websites such as the Digital Technologies Hub or the Australian Computing Academy. I am going to stop sharing now. On the slide that Simon has, there we go.
How's that? Has that come up?
Yep, that's right. Yeah. On that first slide, there is a link to a video tour that goes into a little bit more detail about what else is there if you're interested in having a look at that, and a link there to the same link that's in the chat to the actual page where you can find all of this material. So please do go and have a look. There are lots of bits and pieces there that will help you with various parts of it, and a lot of the material that's been there has been inspired by teachers who are part of the project who've asked us to make particular things to help them explain concepts to their students, or to work with staff members who are putting some of this into action in ways that link to other areas of the curriculum. So thank you very much. Back to you, Simon.
Great. Thanks, Mel. And yeah, it's been, as you mentioned, we've worked with the Digital Technologies Hub and the Australian Computing Academy just to ensure there's not too much overlap with the content that's out there. There is so much out there, but what these resources, I guess, where they've come from, as Mel pointed out, have been just things that we've been doing in the classrooms with schools and with teachers that we thought that we were already sharing within the project that would be really good if we made them public to everyone. So I think this is probably the most interesting part for schools that are teachers that are online, is actually hearing from teachers that have been involved in the project. So I'm just going to introduce two teachers here in the project, and then we'll go through a couple of questions, and then we're going to open it up to see if there's any other questions from the participants this afternoon. So I'd like to introduce Linda Wright, the Assistant Principal at Wodonga South Primary. Linda, if you would like to just introduce and give some context to your school.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Hopefully you can hear me all, and hello to you all out there. That's great. Yeah, so we've been very fortunate to be part of the project. I've almost lost track. I think it's 2016. We started, was it, Simon, with you? And he's worked alongside us for all of that time. So it's been a fantastic learning experience for us. And it's only when you reflect on those questions that you sent through yesterday or the day before for us to have a think about that you realise that the gains that have been made in that period of time, because if you look back to where we started from. So you mentioned one of the things that we wanted me to talk about was the strategies that we felt were useful. We did
sorry,
have,
Linda.
Yep.
What I'll do is I'll just introduce Rosetta too.
Oh, sorry.
And then we'll go through those questions. But one of the things that would be good to hear about is the type of school that Wodonga South is.
The profile.
Quite a large school in comparison to Rosetta. So it's just to give that context.
Yeah, so yeah, our school is sitting at between 550 and 600 students at the moment, so that fluctuates backwards and forwards. We have 24 home group classes, and they're multi-age classes primarily across the school. And we do have a fairly large turnover of staff. We are situated on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, which is proving to be an interesting experience at the moment. And our school is growing in numbers of students with English as additional language background, Koori, and we also do have a fairly large number of students that are supported from the program for disability as well. So that's, yeah, that in a nutshell, that's probably us.
Excellent. Thanks, Linda. And I'd also like to introduce Rosetta. the Deputy Principal and also the Teaching and Learning Leader at St. Stephen's Catholic Primary School in Reservoir.
Hi everyone. We're on the opposite spectrum of Linda. We're a really small school of 63 students. There are 4 classes, a prep, a 1-2, a 3-4 and a 5-6, with 12 staff members in total. We feel very, very fortunate to be working in such a peaceful community, and it's a positive community, but it does have its drawbacks because sometimes we don't have the personnel to be able to live out some of our big ideas that we have. We've been with the project since 2018. So, yeah, I'm not sure if you want me to expand on that. Yeah.
That's great, Rosetta. I think it gives some good context, and I think for those that are listening online, at least we can get a sense, because sometimes it's you'd like to hear from schools that are in a similar situation, or how do other schools deal with different situations. So just giving that context is important. Excellent, thanks. So what we'll do is we'll go through these questions which help kind of give sense to, or what the schools have been through, what they've found really beneficial, but also the challenges. The idea is these questions relate to how we've gone about implementing a new curriculum area, such as the digital technologies. So you're going to hear from both Linda and Rosetta around how they've gone about that, how they've built capacity with their teachers, how they've implemented different programs within their schools, what different tools they've used or resources, and hopefully that'll kind of give you a sense of their journey, but also give you an opportunity to ask questions and network as well. So Linda, I'll start with you with strategies that you've used that have been effective, I guess, so far in working towards implementation.
Thanks, Simon. I think one of the key things was we don't have a digital technologies specialist teacher. One of the things that Simon talked about in introducing was making it sustainable. So we felt that it needed to be everybody in the school involved. So we identified leaders from across the school. So we did start with 3 of us on the team, and in the following year we had got people to nominate from the foundation, year 1, 2, 3, 4s, 5, 6s and specialists to be part of the group that participated in fairly intensive PD with Simon to upskill and build their capacity, with the expectation that they would be the leaders within their teams across the school. So that worked out to be a really key underpinning of success, I would say, because it meant that we had more people with that shared understanding. And what we would do is we would have a day's release and work with Simon. We worked on different things like the MOOC. We worked through different activities from there to build capacity, with the expectation that then the teachers would, with support from Simon, would then present back to the staff, the whole staff, and then lead the whole staff through some of the key learnings that they had. So that did work really well. We've usually had a professional development session in the evenings with our whole staff after Simon's worked with key people once per term, and that's worked out really well as well to help build capacity across the school. And we've also 2 other things that I think have been really valuable. Simon has worked to support us to component map our curriculum, so to look at where digital technologies fits across all areas of our curriculum with the key leaders of those different areas, so that we have got it documented. So if we're thinking about sustainability, I feel like that's something that those documents are there, so that when we go back to the year planners and the term planners and things, if the staff that were involved at the time were not there, that we've got that documentation to fall back on again once the project's finished and once key staff have left. There was other things that I thought were really key as well, was the opportunity to try out new technologies such as Bebots and Makey, Microbits and Scratch that Simon introduced us to. And down the track, once people had an opportunity to learn how to use those technologies and to implement the curriculum, we then purchased our own resources so that we've got them within the school to support us going forward. One other thing that I'd like to just mention is just the unplugged aspect. I think that really helped looking at that and bringing the resources into the school to help people see that it's not just about using the technologies, it's the unplugged aspects of it as well that helped enhance people's understanding. So in terms of the strategies, I think they were the ones that were the key effective ones that I can think of. I'm not sure if I've missed anything, Simon, that comes to mind. Oh, yes, sorry. Having Simon and other curriculum officers coming and working alongside our students in the classrooms. Our Year 1-2 students did an inquiry on developing and encoding their own game through Scratch, and we had Simon out this year, but a couple of years ago, 4 ACARA curriculum officers came out and worked alongside the kids and the students in the class, and that was a fantastic experience.
Excellent, thanks, Linda. And just before I move over to Rosetta, I just want to give credit to the CSER University of Adelaide there, because you mentioned their MOOCs, which are their online courses that I'm sure many Victorian teachers are aware of. They're free online courses around how to implement digital technologies or go through the curriculum. There's a new one there about cyber safety, and they had the lending library, which is where you got some of those resources, which was available to all Victorian schools. So just a little kind of note there, but yeah, great. Thanks for sharing, Linda. Rosetta, I'm just going to go over to you around different strategies that supported your implementation.
Well, I had a similar experience to Linda in that we've used people from outside to support us. When I moved over to St Stephen's, I had come from Holy Child, which is also part of the project. So I already knew Simon, and one of the reasons why we moved over to St Stephen's was because they were really interested in getting STEM and maker spaces and looking at digital technologies more closely. So we began our journey by looking at the design thinking process and looking at that in planning and connecting that to what we were doing with our exploration of digital technologies in the curriculum. So we used the hexagon thinking process, where we had each of the indicators of the whole Victorian curriculum on a different hexagon, just to help staff to be aware that they didn't need to work harder, they needed to work smarter and to link the learning areas, because we did have an ICT specialist the first year I was there, and as of last year we've moved to having digital technologies developed within the classroom context. And whilst it does have its hiccups, I think it makes for a more authentic, meaningful experience for the kids if they've actually got it as part of something that they're doing within their classroom and not as a specialist. Alongside all of that, we also worked with organisations such as Zoo Victoria. We worked with AKORN, AKORN, and we had staff go off to some professional development at the Engineers Building in the city. Part of the STEM, Mad for STEM expos with the Catholic Education Office for the last 2 years. And we also have been fortunate enough to stumble across an engineer who lectures at La Trobe Uni and is also very interested in maker spaces, and he's been alongside us in this journey, and his name's Greg Jarnis, and he introduced us to a European makey space project, and we had people come out from Europe and we shared ideas there. So ours has really been a lot about finding people from outside to support, obviously, our lack of numbers with staffing, because what we lack in numbers, we make up for in energy and enthusiasm, and everyone is really keen to get on board, but it's really challenging when you don't have the numbers. Yeah, and we've also tried to engage the whole school in big idea units that saw us going off to Lego Masters, for example. So looking at those unplugged tasks as well, and not just focusing on digital technologies as being using devices. I know we also looked at systems thinking when we were looking at how our community fits together and translating that across to what we do digitally as well. That was with a 1-2 class. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Or there's probably more, but at this moment I can't remember.
Great, Rosette. No, thank you for sharing those. Just the next part, I guess, is, you know, we all face challenges when we're trying to implement a new curriculum or different programs within a school. So, Linda, have there been, what challenges? I know you did mention staff turnover in the intro. Are there challenges?
Probably the key ones that I would think of is, in the beginning, just like complete lack of understanding of what the digital technology curriculum was all about, which was why we were part of the project. So, so that was, we struggled to plan and implement because we didn't understand. So it probably wasn't the challenge of the project, but it set the scene as to where we started. We also didn't have we didn't have the understanding, we didn't have the resources because it was the beginning of our journey. So those things have been worked through, as I said, in the key strategies. So also throughout the project, when working with the officers at the school and trying to implement things, we also unearthed some issues with our ICT setups and things at the school, the networks, the kids' ability to store their work, and the setup of software that we wanted to use. But it was good. I mean, if we hadn't embarked on this project and tried to tackle implementing these things, we wouldn't have identified those issues and worked through those as well. So they were a challenge, but they've presented with good outcomes as a result. Yeah, and the final one is just the massive turnover of staff that we've experienced during the time of this project, which is just one of those things. But it would have been nice to have kept the same teachers that began with us all the way through to the end to get a more genuine sense of the growth that's been made. So that'll be harder to track than we had initially anticipated.
And that's something across the 160 schools in the project. It's that movement of staff and expertise across schools, and you know, the amount of knowledge that goes with someone is a huge challenge. Rosetta, any other challenges that you found through the implementation?
Well, I agree with what you've said about the amount of knowledge that goes with someone once it leaves the gap. When we started at St Stephen's, because I moved across with the current principal, and we had a server that was 25 years old. So we had a lot of building up of the infrastructure as well, of putting in a server that could actually allow students to store material on the server. The other thing, it's about keeping up the momentum. If you're somewhat, I think if you're the only one that's running it, then it will fall apart. And I suppose one of the challenges is that how do you put in place structures and a framework that will allow for that loss of intellectual ability that goes when people move on. And I think that's a big challenge for everyone in education, not just in digital technologies, but across the board. And, you know, remote learning, do I need to say more? That's been a massive challenge keeping it up, but yeah, we're trying.
Yeah, definitely one of the biggest, you know, changes in education in times that the teachers have had to tackle. So as I said earlier, it's been amazing to see what teachers have done in such a short amount of time with going on to a remote learning and being involved in both schools and seeing what you've both done. And I know, Rosetta, you're in that space again. But working with the students this morning, it was amazing to see their resilience and how they cope with the current situation. And I guess that kind of, that's a surprise, even though, yes, it's a challenge. It's been a nice surprise to see how some students have coped, not all, obviously, in that current situation. Linda, have there been any other surprises that you've found during the project?
I don't know if you'd say it as surprises as much, but it's just been pleasing to see the enthusiasm from the staff embracing the changes. I think you've commented on that yourself when you've come into the school, whether they've been newer staff, that the existing staff or the newer staff that have come in, everybody's been pretty keen to jump on board with it and give it a go.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that helps then with, I think that comes from a clear direction from leadership too, and this is important, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to focus on. So I think, it stems from a really good message coming from leadership too. Rosetta, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I was just moving because one of the challenges is finding a spot that's not noisy. Look, for me, it's been seeing children, because we do have several children who are also special needs and are on the spectrum, and seeing children that sometimes are challenged by learning in a traditional scenario, even though you might put contemporary protocols in place, it's still fantastic to see kids shine and their moment to shine, from the child that is super amazing at navigating around devices to the child who struggles with learning and can't read. However, one of the comments that Greg made to me was he's never seen someone use a screwdriver with so much vigour and expertise, and able to then transfer that knowledge of what she was pulling apart and using that process in a makerspace scenario to put it into context with something that we were doing in Makey when we were looking at circuits, and so she was able to make that connection because it was meaningful to her. So those are the surprises that I think make it all worthwhile.
Excellent. Now, I'm just mindful of time, so and I want to allow for some questions that we cover some of the questions that are coming up in the chat. But we'll get through these last 3 questions. So Linda, this one's more around students, so changes in students or teachers, but I think let's focus in on how the students have changed in their capacity over the course of the project.
I think we were really, when you talk about surprise, we were very surprised how young kids can take on some of these technologies. And so each year the kids seem to be more knowledgeable and have more skill. And yeah, so we've got the children in the year 1, 2s developing their coding through their Scratch projects, and they're like ducks to water using B-bots and things like that. So yeah, I can probably see growth more clearly in our staff. It's anecdotal with regard to the students, I suppose. Like, we see that their skills sets are getting better. I just haven't probably been able to track students for enough time to say, well, what they learned back here, they've then transferred up as they've gone throughout the school. So that's still probably a work in progress, to be honest.
Yeah, and something I think
and one of the next steps for us with you is working on assessing digital technologies, which will allow us to understand the growth better than we do currently.
Yeah, exactly. And look, coming out there and seeing the grade 1, 2 students using the online Scratch platform to start designing games based on the stories that they've created, yeah, it's a pretty impressive site. Rosetta, any changes to, you did mention in the surprises around students and dealing with special needs or high needs students. Are there any other examples or changes that you've seen?
I think that staff now, because of the constant encouragement that they're getting, are looking for ways to get digital solutions to what they're doing with their learning, so that they're not just looking for the poster. They're looking for something that interacts with others, and that's because in planning we actually ensure that we're planning for digital technologies. It's not an afterthought, it's part of the taking action. So from that point of view, it is pleasing to see. However, you do need someone to champion the role, and that's where things can fall down. When people leave, it's easy for it to just all fall by the wayside. So it's about putting things in place so that it's part of the norm. Yeah, keeping up that energy that you have. Yeah.
That's great. Excellent. So we might move into what are your next steps or goals moving forward? You've already mentioned just then, Linda, about focusing now. You know, you've built capacity in the teachers and the understandings there, and now it's more around assessment. Any other examples, I guess, of the next steps or how we might go about that?
Yeah, the assessment is definitely one, and just to continue, I guess, to look for opportunities to weave digital technologies into our year, term and weekly planners. So just to make sure that we continue to do that, because we've identified some opportunities, but I want us to continue to do that and to continue to look at that as part of it, so that it doesn't become static and that's all we do. And as there are new technologies and new ways available, that we continue to embrace them. That'd be the key ones.
Great. Excellent. Thanks, Linda. And Rosetta, what about next steps for you guys?
Well, I would agree with Linda as far as continuing the process that we've already set up, so that it is part of what we do and not an afterthought. So it comes down to knowing the curriculum and knowing how it actually all weaves together, so that you can assess several learning areas using possibly a digital solution. But that would involve more work on the way we plan and ensuring that that framework that's in place is a framework that everybody uses and not just the person that seems to be passionate about digital technologies. The other thing, where we've had to relocate our STEM makerspace area, and we're in the process of putting that back together. And it's been a great way to reevaluate the purpose of what that's for, and incorporating that as an area where children can play, discover, and also create these solutions to what they're doing with their learning in the classroom, so that they're all interwoven and linked. That's our big thing that we're in, and not losing momentum.
Yeah, exactly. And I think potentially that you've both kind of alluded through your answers around this, you know, having a really clear structure, documentation, things like that in place, that when someone leaves, it doesn't, you know, kind of the knowledge doesn't disappear. And I think that might answer, I'm just looking now at some of the questions there, and I know Daryl had a question around, you know, when literacy teacher leaves the school, for example, that doesn't necessarily fall by the wayside, and potentially maybe it's making sure that, you know, there are those policies or the documents or the structures in place that you'll see that continue. So I'm just going to open it up. Mel, you might have been monitoring the questions too, or Deb. Were there any other kind of questions that were in the chat before we open it up to anyone online?
I think people have been listening intently, so there's not a lot of questions in the chat at the moment, but please do feel free to add any if you have any for Linda or Rosetta. I would just ask a question because I think Linda and Rosetta have got some really interesting things to say about this too, and picking up on Daryl's point about the links to digital technologies and literacy. It's a question that's often asked of the curriculum officers in the DTIF project, especially for schools that are putting a heavy focus on literacy as a priority. How do you do that? How do you link literacy and digital technologies? And I wonder if Rosetta or Linda, maybe I'll ask Linda first since Rosetta spoke last, whether you could add anything there about positive changes you've seen in literacy whilst using digital technologies, or ways that you've thought about linking those together.
Yeah, thanks for that, Melanie. One of the things that we did with Simon was get our literacy leaders in the school that plan with all of literacy across the school, so they lead the planning. We sat down with Simon and mapped the curriculum and looked at digital technologies and opportunities to link that with literacy. And we came up, things that we looked at were things like flow charts and procedures, and how we can link the things that you do within literacy and link that into digital technology. So we've got those mapped in across the school. And as I said before, what our expectation is that if a new literacy leader comes into the school, they can refer to those documents and resources and ensure that those areas are covered through the curriculum that way.
I think it's also that you need to get your literacy leader to be passionate about digital technologies. I'm in the fortunate position that I am the literacy leader as well as the numeracy leader. So whilst it's challenging because there's a lot of different elements, I'm fortunate that I can help, I drive the learning, and because I have a passion for digital technologies, I get them to link it in with what they're doing in literacy. And that was an example of what Simon was doing this morning with the children in my class. And he's also working with us on Monday on another idea that comes from, I think it comes from knowing the content. I think if you know the content, so that's about building teacher capacity, and it comes back to that, I suppose. I don't know, Simon, if you want to share what you're doing with the class.
Yeah. Look, that I think you've hit the nail around the whole. A lot of the focus for the project has been around building capacity, because it's a new area of the curriculum. Building that capacity so that then when you're looking for those links, and I know in some of the Scratch projects that Linda's been doing, it's around developing a storyline, and they're doing a narrative, and then they're creating the Scratch game that links to the narrative. So there's some kind of link there, as well as mentioning the flow charts that she did. So yeah, there's lots of different ways, but you're right in talking about building that capacity. There's a question here too. Sorry, I'm just going through around the platform that we use to communicate with each other and how often we meet. So originally we did have like an online platform that was through Discourse, I believe, but it wasn't used very often, and it was just another space to go. And as we all know, teachers are busy enough without having to log into their emails, do their, the great work that they do in the classroom, and then have another space to kind of go to and collaborate in. So we were mindful of that. We tried it, and it didn't necessarily work. So a lot of the communication is the curriculum officer will communicate directly with the schools. That's their job. They've got 20 schools. They coordinate a lot of the work. And then throughout the project, there are checkpoints, I guess, or progress reports, where we get together a little bit like we're doing now, but the different geo-cluster schools get together and share what they've been up to. It's 5 slides, 5 minutes, that type of setting. So that's really, I guess, there's how we've been going. We don't say this is the platform that you need to use in regards to how your teaching and learning programs go, because obviously schools have already got things in place for that. Mel, how's the chat going there? There's a couple of questions, I think.
Yeah, there was a question there from Cam about whether or not there are openings for schools to get on board a project partnership. And I've just put our technology's email address in there for anyone who'd like to contact us. Whilst the project is in the final stages now, we are always open to chatting to people about ways that we can connect with you or connect you to other schools or other organizations we know may be able to help you. Although we have a particular number of schools who are in the project, our ultimate aim is that we help as many people as possible to get their heads around what the digital technologies curriculum is all about, and find ways of helping you do that. So please do email us if there's some way we can figure out how we can help you or provide more information or point you to resources, because we know a lot about people in different areas. We'd be very happy to do that.
Yeah, excellent. So I guess one thing, I'm not sure if we did mention it, the 160 schools that were originally chosen or not chosen, they were asked to be involved. They had a choice, were based on their Ixia value. So they were a low Ixia value. They had a low Ixia score, which basically meant they were either remote, rural, or low socioeconomic area. That's how the 160 schools were involved. But as Mel said, we're looking for partnerships or supporting other schools across the country in supporting digital technologies implementation. So yeah, please get in contact with us. And I do want to thank Rosetta and Linda. It's fantastic to hear from teachers that are there in schools working through this implementation over the last number of years, and thank them for their time in supporting the project, but also hopefully giving you some insights into how to go about tackling some of the challenges.
Simon, you might want to just pop up that final slide that has some contact details on there for folks who may want to get in touch with us. There is a link there to our newsletter. We always are connecting the newsletter readers with organizations that can help give you more information about ways of understanding or implementing digital technologies. And it also updates you with any new resources that we create and publish each time it comes out. And this month's newsletter also includes a tutorial that's based on some really simple ideas to get students to monitor environmental factors that might impact learning. So a way to make it a little bit interesting for them. So we encourage you to do that. The email address you can see on screen is for the lead for the Digital Technologies Project, Julie King, and the main technologies email address is in the chat there if you'd like to. And I think we also have a number of ways of helping people see when we have interesting things to share on our social media channels there, which is just on that final slide. Kelly's just popped a question into the chat that might be good for us to answer as our parting gesture. Kelly's asked primary versus secondary breakdown of the participating schools. Good question.
So the 160 schools are a ratio representation of schools across the country. So there are more primary schools than secondary schools in the project, but the ratio is ideally, or it was primarily to be the same as what you would see across the country, and that goes also with government, department, Catholic and independent schools as well. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, Mel, but
the DTIF website does give descriptions about the nature of the project, and you can find more information out about those details if you go to the page that's on the chat, and will also be available on the slides that are recorded and provided to you by Nathan.
Yeah, but we definitely do focus on both. Yeah.